All right, so welcome to Letter of Intent Writing for Non-Writers. I am Tony Guerra. I'm a pharmacist. I host the Pharmacy Residency podcast. We've had, it's almost 350 episodes. And then even before that, I did the Pharmacy Future Leaders podcast. And I've been a pharmacist for a long time. I graduated from Maryland in 97, but I married a great Drake grad many years later. And now we've got triplet daughters and live up in Ankeny, so just about 15 minutes north of you guys. But what I wanted to go over today was a type of writing that's very different than what the type of writing you're used to. And my concern is that you'll feel like, well, I've written stuff before, I can write this, and how really difficult it is to do it and why it's difficult, and then some things that you can do to make it maybe a little bit easier for you. Okay. So let's start with "you're all writers" as a premise, and maybe we'll see if that's our hypothesis and see if we can kind of change that around. Okay. So you're all writers. You've all done writing. So each day you're probably texting each other, talking to each other and things like that. You're communicating in other ways, whether it's Instagram or TikTok, Facebook, if you guys use that anymore, Twitter, good gracious, I don't even know if anybody's on that anymore, and so forth. So you've got all those kinds of ways that you do writing, but is it the kind of writing that we're going to need? With emails, I think also something like emails, it's also no problem, relatively straightforward. Though I see a lot of emails coming from students that maybe don't have a salutation or complimentary close. And that's just a fancy way of saying you just write what's in the body as if you're texting somebody, but you forget that, in an email, it's kind of like a letter. So you should say, "Hey, Professor such and such," or "Hello, such and such," especially as you're doing this residency thing. And then, the salutation, I have an email signature, so I just put, "best such and such," and I've already got that there. But it is much more professional if you greet the person and you say goodbye to the person in an email. You write notes to each other all the time, and what I'm really talking about is just when you say, "Hey, we've got to get these things done for this class," or "I'll meet you somewhere," and so forth. So you may be writing something for your roommate. "Hey, please don't put the bowl in the sink. Please wash it," or something like that. But you've written to each other. So you've communicated through writing, texting, emails, notes. Research papers, you have some experience with this, some of you more than others, depending on what you've been doing. And maybe you've worked with even other people on peer-reviewed research. So you've had experience writing, but that's kind of boring writing. And that's not the kind of engaging writing that you're going to need, because if you talk about, the average residency getting around 100, 200 applications, that's a lot to read. And I can tell you that they don't read them all, and they don't read all of what they have. What they do is, if something gives them a hook, if something's interesting, then they will read it and they'll invite you for an interview. So the research paper writing, you have experience writing longer papers, professional papers, but a research paper is not really a cover letter. It's not really a letter of intent. And then patient notes, you get better with practice as you're doing this, really communicating to the other staff, the interprofessional team, the physicians, the nurses, and so forth. But again, this took time, and you're getting better at it, and maybe you had some opportunities in IPPEs and things like that. But really, how do you do this and do it in such a time, because you have to have these letters of intent done by December for the deadline, but you really want to have them done now. And the reason you want to have them done now is because they're reflective. They're just saying, okay, well, what do you plan to do? Okay, well, once you figure out what you plan to do, then you can ask your preceptor, "Hey, I'm missing some research," or "Hey, I need more clinical practice," or "I just don't have any teaching experience." And this allows you to make that to them. So what I want to do is better frame the question. Really famous guy from A Beautiful Mind was the Nobel Prize winner, who kind of came up with this win-loss theorem. And what he really did was he just asked the question better. So what I want to do is ask the question better. What do you really need to do when you're talking about a letter of intent? What is the assignment? And I want to give that to you here. Okay. So the assignment is this. If you're applying to 12 sites, which is the average, especially this year, because it's going to be a lot cheaper because you're going to have ASHP mid-year is going to be virtual, so people are going to have extra money. And I think the competition is going to be higher, so I think it's going to be a bit closer to 12. I think it might have been more like 10 or 11 last year. So here is the assignment. Write 12 unique letters about yourself that will summarize your work, clinical, research, teaching, leadership, and service experience in your last 4 years of professional school, as these experiences match to the strengths of each of 12 unique residency sites' offerings of required, elective, and longitudinal experiences with perfect grammar and syntax in less than a single typewritten page of no greater than 12-point font with 1-inch margins, while completing your 4th professional year of school at a quality that will place that letter in the top 20% of letters those sites receive. So that's the assignment. You have 12 letters to write. And the idea is, okay, well, is there a way to kind of make this easier? Is there a way to better understand the challenge that you have? So let's talk about this concept, the illusion of explanatory depth. I explained this in The Strong Residency Letter of Intent, Writing to be Interviewed with a Cover Letter That Earns the Invite. This is a book I've written. I think it's like $10 on Amazon as an ebook. You can also get it as and my recommendation is to get it as an audiobook, so you'll actually listen to it. Some people just don't like to listen to it. My wife loves ebooks. I love audiobooks. And so we're just different that way. It's available in both, but I definitely recommend you do this as just a way to become a student of the process of writing this letter of intent. And this one's geared to pharmacists. So, but the illusion of explanatory depth says we've got this thing that should be pretty easy to explain. What's a letter of intent? What do I do? So it's just a letter about you, and you just explain why you want to go to that residency. So it should be easy, right? So here's from the book. Can you tell me how a microwave book works? And you'd probably say, sure. But then when I ask you to give me a detailed explanation with drawings, you might really struggle. This is an illusion of explanatory depth, which basically says most people believe they understand something better than they do until they have to explain it to someone else in detail or try it themselves. So I don't usually get a lot of people asking for help for letters of intent until later because they haven't tried it yet. So I have helped 25 people so far with their letters of intent for this coming up residency cycle, which is a little bit more than usual. But it's really easy for me now because I've done it so many times. I know exactly what to look for. I know exactly what gaps are there. But what we're trying to do is write a letter of intent. And you may think, well, it's just a letter. I'll just write letter, later. I'll just bang those 12 out. It'll be no problem. And, you've written emails and papers and a resume and a CV, but properly crafting a letter of intent that earns you an interview, it's a specific skill set. And I want to talk about kind of how you think it's going to go and how it really goes. So if you haven't tried it yet, it's going to be interesting. So let's start with how you think it might go. Okay. So a letter of intent is very much like coaching youth soccer. It's kind of this thing where you're like, it's just a bunch of kids, just going to teach them how to kick the ball around. All will be well, no problem. Okay. And, when you think of your letter of intent, you're like, you know what, maybe, I got some time, just going to go hit the beach for a little while. And yes, I get we're in central Iowa. But, let's just go relax, just type out a letter or two, just kind of get a couple of those done to my top 2 sites and all will be well. Okay. Then you experience youth soccer or you experience letter of intent writing, and it is completely different than you expected. So in coaching youth soccer, I coach my daughter's team. I have triplet 9-year-olds, and they're all on the team, although they prefer different positions. One prefers the striker center mid position where she's kind of controlling the flow. Another one prefers to attack from the wing and steal the ball and then take shots on goal and, just hit a really hard shot. And then another one just loves defense, just loves the challenge of going one-on-one with someone, keeping them from scoring, passing it to the offense and letting them go up. Okay. We did have a recent loss. We'd done really well all season, and I made a mistake in communicating where positions were and just gave a bunch of goals in about 8 minutes. And it wasn't like that. I was probably tearing up more than they were, to be honest. And then letter of intent writing, just kind of a visual, how it might look after you just get started. And you're like, why is this so hard? Okay. So let's find some answers to getting this done. Okay. So what I usually do when I have a difficulty, whether it's parenting, figuring out youth soccer, or whatever it is, I want to know who wrote the book on the subject. Okay, so the book that people use and are like, oh, all is well. Okay, and then should I try it on my own? Should I try it on my own? I guess I missed a word there, but should I try on my own? And then should I work with a template? Right. So is there kind of a starter way for me to get things going with soccer? It's like, okay, we'll just use a 2-3-1 formation. If you want to work with an attack diamond and then 2 defenders, or use a 3-2-1 where you're going to have a much better defense and then you're going to be able to send the ball up, but you're not going to have the numbers when you're attacking. So the first one is a little bit riskier, but welcomes possession ball. And the second one is a little bit easier, but it's a lot harder to score on both sides of the ball. Okay. And then how do I improve my writing or my soccer from there? How do I get things going from there? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you something that's more familiar, the soccer, and then I'll go and transition that to the residency writing. And I get it. Most of you probably don't have kids, and this is maybe a little bit unfamiliar to you. But these are some tactics that made things a lot better. In the beginning of the residency book, I talk about this absolute beatdown where we lost, I want to say 5-0 or 6-0. And I couldn't get them to even go back in the game because they were so busy crying that they were losing that I couldn't even get them to play. So we just had to stop the game and just call it like, look, you won, good job, we're done. So let's look at soccer. Okay. Who wrote the book on the subject? Dan Blank, Soccer IQ, Things That Smart Players Do. Who is this guy? Who's Dan Blank? I follow soccer. Who is that guy? He coached an NAIA team down in Florida, and then he coached, I think, Georgia for a little while. And his book is so popular, more popular than Messi's book, Lionel Messi's book, the top male player, and more popular than the top female player's book in the world. And it's because there are a lot more of us that are trying to teach young kids to play than there are those kind of super high power soccer player. So there's 3 points that were kind of really important from the book. The first was he uses the word the Holy Grail, which is increased speed of play, tactics, and I'll talk about the 50-50 throw-in ball and understanding what your kind of challenge is. And then being in the right place at the right time. So what I did was I put wristbands on them. So the blue were the defenders, the pink were the midfielders, and then the white was the striker. And then I eventually made it so just the blue were the defenders because everybody wanted to be a forward, and there was they just felt like they were missing out by being a midfielder. So, and then I got rid of the bands altogether once they understood what they were doing. But on Saturday, this last Saturday, we were winning 4-2, and 8 minutes later we were losing 6-4. That is such a huge swing because in the last 5 games, we'd given up 4 points in 5 games. And in 8 minutes, we gave up 4 points. So what in the world happened? Someone was absolutely not in the right place at the right time. It was actually 2 someones, and it was my fault because there was an injury. I replaced the person. I didn't let them know exactly where they were supposed to play as a defender. And then the person that was supposed to mirror them was mirroring them go up to the front. So we had 4 wings, 2 forwards, and no defenders. And they just went right through the middle 4 times and scored on the goalie. And it was just absolutely devastating. But being in the right place at the right time. Okay. So let's go into detail a little bit more. Speed of play. You take everything you do and you do it faster. So where you might see a youth soccer game and someone goes to pick up a throw in, looks to the right, looks straight ahead, looks to the right, their person's covered, they're just waiting and waiting and waiting, then they take forever and there's no advantage. And I'll show you in the next slide how you can get an advantage with a throw in. And then this next thing is one-touch passes. So when someone passes it to you and you just make the next pass really quickly, as you'll see in the Premier League, the best league, the English league, that'll happen really fast as well. Okay. The same thing is true for asking for recommendations when we're talking about residency, where if you are late to ask for those recommendations, you may not get them because they're like, well, look, I'm busy. I've already had people ask for them. You were a great APPE student. I appreciate it, but I just don't have the time to write a proper recommendation. Okay, so you need to do those early. And there's really two asks for recommendation. You ask them if they'll do it just after your APPE, and then you actually give them the information to make a good recommendation later. Okay. Number two, so first was speed of play. Number two is tactics. So a throw-in ball, almost at every level except maybe the Premier League or that highest league, is a 50-50 ball. You throw it in, half the time you're going to get it, half the time they're going to get it. So in youth soccer, in this ice bowl that we played, when we kicked the ball, it was like a futsal where it's like a really heavy ball, and it just wouldn't go anywhere. So another 15 feet would be huge because that's almost two passes from one to another. And connecting passes in youth soccer is we try. I'll just leave it at that. So what we do is you would throw in towards their goal instead of throwing backwards towards yours, because half the time you're going to lose it anyway. So it makes sense. So this is my daughter in good throwing position. That's me in the back left with my mask on. And she's going to throw it towards the goal. Okay. But knowing the odds and accepting them. Okay. I accept that it is a 50-50 that I'm going to lose, which is the exact same thing you have for residency odds. I know they'll say it's 0.6, but that's actually more if you get an interview. Your odds, if you just go in and say, I want a residency, and then, you try it, it's about 50-50. And then, of course, depending on the school you're at, and you're at one of the schools that has a better residency match rate. Okay, but you have to know the odds and accept them. So if you're going to apply to UNC, recognize that there might be 400, 500 applications, and your chances of getting that site are less than 1%. Okay, so you don't want to go all in, say, okay, well, this is the only place I'm going to apply to. So that's why people are applying to 10, 12 sites and so forth, up to 18 I've seen as well. Okay, and then the third kind of really big take-home point is being at the right place at the right time. When you have the ball and you don't have the ball, puts you in two different shapes. So if you had APPEs at a site that you're applying to and you haven't, then your tactics should be completely different. If you've had the APPE there, then you've done a 5-week interview and you're going to be talking about people directly, and you're going to be talking about work that you've done with them and experiences that you've had with them, and that you've got this EHR down, and that you understand the health records, and that you feel that you fit in there. Okay. And then if you haven't done an APPE there, you're going to talk about how you feel like you could fit in there, how everything that they do matches what you've done, and that you say, well, this hospital is kind of like your hospital, and all of those things. What I have here on the board is different shapes. And what we did was, and why we lost those 4 points in that 8-minute time period, is these guys thought they were these guys, and they were actually even higher up here. And these defenders thought they were wings. So this person thought they were a left mid, and this person thought they were a right mid. And then here come their players, and sure enough, straight down the middle, it was 2-on-1, 3-on-1 with the goalie. And they just scored and scored and scored. And, to be fair, my daughter had just been hurt. I'd gotten her off the field. We had somebody else that had gotten spiked, gotten her off the field. Things were pretty tense in terms of the actual game. And, I didn't notice it. And then I'm trying to get subs in, and I couldn't get subs in because the ball was still in play. It was goal kick and so forth. And so it was just kind of a nightmare where I could not get the two people that needed to be here, that knew where they were going to play here, into the game. Okay. But my tactics were going to be completely different when I didn't have the ball or we didn't have the lead and I needed to protect that goalie than if I'm going to go on the attack. So once I go on the attack, maybe this is a little okay, though I'd want them back here. Okay. So the idea is right place, right time, right tactics. Okay. So with the LOI, and again, I wrote the book, so this is kind of self-effacing, but I wrote the strong residency letter of intent, writing to be interviewed, with a cover letter that earns the invite, because no one's written it. No one wrote a letter of intent book for pharmacists. So I've written the book. And I'm going to kind of make the transition now to residency and how speed of play, tactics, and right place, right time fit in. And so this is going to be just a direct quote from the book. Okay. So when applying for a residency, you don't realize that the speed of play is not up to par until a professor rejects your recommendation request because she already has too many. When you spend weeks on your CV compared to only hours on your letter of intent and recommendations, your tactics are off. The LOI and recommendation letters count much more than your CV and 4 years of school combined. How can that possibly be? How can 4 years of school and your CV not be more valuable than a letter of intent and recommendation letters? Okay. Well, think about the last time you wanted to get a haircut in maybe a new town, or the last time you wanted to find somebody to help you with something. What'd you do? You asked for a recommendation or a referral. Okay. So a referral is a recommendation letter. It's saying, okay, I'm not going to even bother looking at their qualifications if I've got somebody that's going to tell me they trust someone else. So if there's already someone that you know, like, and trust, well, why not just get that referral? Okay. So that's why recommendations are so important. Everyone has 4 years of pharmacy school or 3 years of pharmacy school. Everyone has a similar curriculum. Maybe you got a little better grades, they got a little bit worse grades, but that was only like a little hurdle. Okay, they have a 3.2, check. Okay, we can read their application. Don't have a 3.2, we're not going to check their application. Okay, and some residencies are more competitive and some are less. Okay. But your CV, it also looks a lot like the other ones, and all we're doing is checking boxes. Okay, they've had APPEs in hospital. Okay, they've done one in critical care. They're applying for critical care. Great, check, 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 check. The LOI and recommendation letters are so valuable because the letter of intent is your only place to say why you are different and why you uniquely match to that site. Your CV doesn't say it. It drives me crazy when students send me a CV instead of an LOI because, okay, great, I've got your CV, I've seen what you've done, I see what you're going to do, but in no way does that CV tell me what you want to do. Okay, it's just a listing of your curriculum of what you've done. The LOI says, oh, well, I want to be a hospitalist, I want to be a BCOP, I want to be a board certified oncology pharmacist. That tells me a lot. And that you've had experience with oncology before, whether through personal experience or through something else. But that tells me a lot more. Okay. And then the recommendation letters tell me that there are 3 people that say you are amazing, you are such a hard worker, and they vouch for you. But also the recommendation letters need to match the LOI. And that's kind of something a lot of people miss, and we'll talk about later. Second thing, so that was the tactics. So third thing, right place, right time. When you talk to a residency director during the mob that's the residency showcase, you're not meeting at the right place and right time. Okay. The meaningful conversations happened at the relaxing kind of state and college gatherings later in the day, and this was when we were face to face. Now, when you go to that ASHP virtual mid-year, everyone's going to have their guard up. You know, they're going to be presenting their residency, not the other way around. And it's going to be being invited to talk to people or talking to them outside of that are going to be the real wins. Okay, so that's right place, right time. So I don't want you shut out like my team was in the game. I don't want you to have an 8-minute turnaround where we lose 4 points and you let your team down because you didn't communicate as a coach to the players what their responsibility was correctly. And you're like, well, it was just 8 minutes. Yeah, it was 8 minutes out of, 300 minutes. And in those 8 minutes, they scored as much as they did in 250 other minutes. How is that possible? So I'm telling you that little things really, really matter. Okay. So should you try on your own? Okay. You're going to try on your own, and many of you will try on your own. And some of you are going to think you did a pretty good job, and you didn't. And I'm going to kind of explain that feeling. So when I was a recreational soccer coach last fall, it worked. I think we were 9-1-0. So we had 9 wins, 1 tie, and no losses. Okay. We had some pretty good players that had played for many years. We had some players that were kind of coming along, but everybody worked together really well. The environment was less competitive, but it didn't feel that way. Parents were still screaming. Kids were still doing things. It felt like we were just amazing. And we didn't lose a game. We had that 1 tie, but we won a tournament. We got medals. We thought we were hot stuff. but we were in recreational soccer at our own age level. Everything was meant to be equal, and we were the best at that equal state. Okay. So let's kind of compare that to what it is when you try on your own with college paper writing. So a college paper gets a grade, and if your writing has never kept you from moving on to the next year, you've never lost a game. So you've never had a college paper lose what you want. Okay. A failed letter of intent may keep someone from moving on to the interview. And so is your writing going to be in the top 20% of those that they receive? The question is, do you even know what that is? So as an applicant, only 25% of the students apply for residency. So you already have to be in the top 25. And then of that top 25, are you the top 20% of that top 25 that's applying? And that answer is probably going to be no. You are probably not a better writer or have a better writing than most of them. And the reason is that a lot of those people are going to get coaching. A lot of those people are going to be good writers. A lot of them are going to have people in their lives that are the English majors and the parents that can help them out. So, are you going to be there? The reality is that you probably can't even judge it. Just because you got an A on a paper and that you were a good writer in college does not necessarily mean that your letter of intent is going to inspire the emotion, have the words that need to be there that say, yeah, you know what, out of the 100 or 200 letters we've read, yours is really up there in that top 20. And we definitely want to bring you in for an interview. Okay. So if I had wanted to stay at that rec soccer level, which this weekend, I really wish I had been back there where, let's just beat all the teams, feel like I'm being a winner and so forth. But I had to get better. My kids had to get better. Our team had to get better. So I really was like, you know what, let's go for it. Let's go to academy. And, they've really thrived and stepped up their game. But when you're going to be going for a competitive residency, that do-it-yourself approach, it's probably not going to be enough. You're going to need someone in your life that is that English major that can give you that hard feedback. And I love that your parents or your family is probably going to have one that is your cheerleader. It's going to be like, you are the best. You're doing so great. I'm so proud of you. And the other one's going to be like, yeah, you're not getting anything with this letter. You really, and you want to kind of, lean into that person who's going to be quite a bit more critical. And so the next step is kind of figuring out, like, what's the shortcut? How do I get in there? And you should really start with a template. There are PDF templates, UCSF, ACP, ASHP have examples, but you will not stand out. Your letter of intent is generic at best, plagiarism at worst, and so be warned. When the first year I did this for free, and then I started charging for it because people weren't invested in it. I was like, okay, well, here's some corrections and things you need to do. But then I don't know if they did them or not. And that's just a waste of my time if I don't get to see that it succeeded or didn't because I can't get better. So I want to show you one of these templates maybe a little bit later that will kind of talk about this. But this is what you're going to see. And if you've already used one of these templates, you're probably going to have this kind of realization right now. And it should be a deep sinking feeling that 50% of the applicants use these words. I am writing to express my interest in the PGY residency at such and such. I have had the pleasure to meet the residents at ASHP meeting, whatever. Your program offers many experiences that I look for. Okay. So first of all, you've plagiarized something that at the bottom says you have no right to use it. The UCSF letter clearly says that it is copyrighted. You should not be using these words in this order. I'm writing to express my interest. I've had the pleasure to meet. Second, you've kind of, this one goes, I've had the pleasure to meet your residents. Well, who do you think is reading it? It's not the RPD, it's your residents. And they're reading it. And you just put them in the ownership of, okay, so wait a minute. RPD's the chief around here and we're the, little guys. You've just insulted the residents in the second sentence of your LOI. And the third, you've just made yourself arrogant. Your program offers many experiences that I look for. I was just looking at the menu of residencies and, I think I might choose yours. Just letting you know. And this idea of tone and how your letter goes is so important, because I will read letters. I'm like, wow, you are not only insulting them, but you are expressing yourself in such a way that they are going to be so lucky to have you. When they're looking at your letter like, delete, it's done. I've got 99 more to go to, or 199 more to go to. Okay. And usually what they do is they split it up. So if there's 5 residents, they'll each get 40 letters and they'll each read them, and you're at the mercy of those residents before it ever even goes to an RPD, because they're busy. They all have jobs, and this is just something additional they have to do. Okay. So I work from a template. I do start there, but how do I improve my writing from there? How do I get things to be better? Okay. So I think the Writing Center is good. This is not me. It's not a picture of me. It's just a stock image. But I just liked, he looked very writerly, with all the books behind him and, kind of the long hair, the facial hair, just kind of like, I trust this guy to, correct my grammar and stuff. So I think they're good for correctness. They're good for content review. And I think, getting family and friends to help you edit and proofread is really good. Okay. But I had a student that was like, oh my gosh, the Writing Center said that my letter was great. They really thought I would get the residency. And then they sent it to me. I was like, yeah, they did. But you totally plagiarized the UCSF letter. Of course they thought it was good. It was a letter that was already, polished and by a school that has an 80% residency match rate. And that's something the Writing Center is not going to catch. They're not going to catch that you're kind of combining the ASHP, ACCP, and the UCSF letters. But I'll catch that in about 5 seconds. I know what the words are from those. I know the syntax. You can try to change it around, but I'll know exactly what you did. Okay. So let's talk about the Holy Grail and tactics and right place, right time for improving your writing. Okay. So the Holy Grail is to become a student of the process. And I've got 12 modules at this residency.teachable.com, extreme LOI. And I'll start going to websites after this presentation part. Second, one tactic is to send the answers to the questions to the recommenders. So what are the questions that your forecasts recommenders are going to be asked? Well, you can look that up. It's available to everybody. And I've got it on the course that you can look at as well. And then, are you at the right place, right time? The right residency sites and website research. Are you matching to something that really matches what you have? So one great example is the Iowa VA, and they use these PACT teams, PACT. And if you use that acronym in your letter, then you're saying, yeah, I've really researched your website. I know who you are and what you're doing. Okay. So what I want to do is kind of go to that website. Okay. And just got to see if I can get that here. So residency.teachable.com, and I think I stopped screen sharing, and now it wants me to share again. So here we go. Okay. All right. So what I do is I just help people one-on-one. I help them with 2 letter of intent makeovers and create kind of unique templates for them, so that they can do their letter of intent and whatever. And that's something you can do if you want. And then you enroll in the course for the money, and then you get the help from me one-on-one. But I just felt the course was critical, because they weren't, you need to become a student of the process. Okay. So let's look at the course curriculum. So first, your residency match risk calculator. You guys are from Drake. You guys are from Drake or Iowa or UCSF or UNC. If you're from one of those, you've got higher numbers, and your residency not matching risk is lower. Okay, so there's an Excel spreadsheet here. Plug in the numbers. Did you graduate this year, and so forth. All as well. The second thing is that there's a program and recruitment events Google Doc going around, and then this is the link to that, where there are recruitment events that have already happened and that are going on as we kind of move along here. Okay. The first thing to kind of do is, using the LOI to build your residency vision. And this is really kind of going over the residency application and explaining what's going on there. What you really need to do is do the letter of intent to go through that hard work of figuring out what do I really want and where do I match to and what trade-offs am I willing to go through. Most people think of trade-offs as location. All right, well, I'll go to Wisconsin instead of Minnesota. All right, I'll go to, wherever. But really, a lot of the trade-offs come from, all right, well, what do their staffing hours look like and things like that. But that's going to come out of your writing your first LOI, no matter how good it is. Okay. And then I've got, all these support videos and so forth. The next thing is an LOI template. So I've written my own template, which is very different than UCSF and so forth. And then what this does is it gets you the big five, clinical research, teaching, service, and leadership. Where are those? And then how to express those in a template. But you definitely want to change it. I think I've had 3,000 or 4,000 views of just that single video. Okay. CVs. So I had a student on rotation with me, and she really helped create a whole CV thing. So I'm not going to charge for something that a student did with me. And so this is really talking about how to update it, put in the content, answers a lot of questions that people have about CVs. Okay. The residency interview template I haven't worked on yet, but there are some books and things like that that I'll add in later. Letters of intent. This one's really the most important one, which is you need to know the residency recommendation actual questions. And then here's the advice for getting a great recommendation. So one of the tactics is to answer those questions like, this is what I think my biggest strength is, and this is what I think my biggest challenge is. And this is why I feel like I matched this particular site. So our presentation's not about that today, but know that you can get free access to that. Talking about mid-year from last time, RPDs, talking directly to them, current residents talking to you, how do you rank residency programs, phase 2 and so forth. Those things I give to the people that are going to be applying to residency. I don't want just it all out there. But the next one is, let's say you don't even want to do residency, or let's say you've done residency and you want to kind of move on. Here's how to do a clinical position cover letter. So it's 20 minutes of me going through it, and then the template's there, but exactly what you need to do and what's different about a cover letter than it would be for something like a letter of intent. And then a lot of job interview help there. Okay. So again, my current role is just if somebody wants to work with me one-on-one, this is an opportunity to do that. Okay. All right. So I do want to have time for questions later, so I'm just going to kind of put this last slide up, which is 2 ways to contact me are to contact me at tonythepharmacist@gmail.com or go to residencyhelp.com. You can get the newsletter, everything like that. I do have a Facebook group you could join as well, Residency Help Facebook group, if you want to talk to other people that are kind of in your situation. But I'll go ahead and take questions now.